next item is item number 19 that we've moved above. Did we move it above 12?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and Randy, I think this is your item.
Yeah, this is a resolution in support of a bill that Senator Marty Harbin has introduced into the Senate. It's Senate Bill 233. And if I may, I would like to get Marty Harbin to make a little presentation.
Over the dais here.
There's the clicker there, and there's the mic. Yeah.
I'm not used to putting my back to people. And so that's a little bit harder for me from that standpoint. I don't like to leave my back to people.
You can fold the mic over
Just-
this
just
way.
go on the other side.
Or
Can I
give
come
him-
on the other side? No, I get my back.
You're a senator, you can go on the other side.
Let me do that. Is that all right?
It's
Yeah,
not on
that's-
yet,
that's
but
perfect.
if you'll turn it on.
Make sure to pick up your clicker too on the thing there.
Yeah. There's a button there.
How about now? Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Thank you for that. I just, when I communicate with people, I don't like to put my back to them and doing that. And I thank you just for the privilege of asking me to be here and letting me present. And I'm honored to be here and honored to represent the people. I have to tell you one of the things, I've known Miss Rosemary Harper since I was really a small child. And I heard a story this morning that I thought was very interesting. There was an old man, and he was planting an apple tree. And his grandson was with him. And he says, "Granddaddy, you will never, never eat apples off of that tree because you'll be dead by the time it gets big enough to bear apples." And he said, "Son, I'm not planting this apple tree for me. I'm planting this apple tree for you and for the next generation." And, you know, I think sometimes we don't think. We think about the immediate. We think about what's coming up. We don't really think about the next generation. And here's what brings that to mind even more so. My father's been dead 12 years. He and Mrs. Harper were friends. And he planted apple trees that I eat off of today. And I was challenged more when I heard the story that I need to be planting things for my children and for my grandchildren. And that's really what we're all about from that standpoint, is thinking about the next generation. Let me talk to you just a little bit about this issue. And it's been kind of, I say there's division in places, but I think the biggest thing is to know what it is. If you know about anything about the First Amendment, the First Amendment's interesting what our founding fathers did. That was after they've won the war, they've won their independence, they do this, they create the First Amendment. Can anybody tell me the first thing in the First Amendment?
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Wow. I would like to have his voice for a narrator. Thank you. Now think about this. Why would the founding fathers take those two things to be the first things? That's a fair question. And let me give you the reasons why. Because there had been the merger of the church and the clergy had been with government. And they were fearful that there would be a state government sponsored by the state. And that state government, because here's what the pastor was saying, you need to bow down to the king because he's sovereign. And you realize that our founding fathers really went against the grain. They went against the religious grain. They went against the political grain of the day. And so that was the first thing. And I found that to be, wow, why would of all the things, I'd pull the Second Amendment first. That would have been my first one. But no, they said, Congress shall make no law as far as the establishment of religion, comma. And then they do one other thing, or the free exercise thereof. How many of you know this? There was not a single solitary Bible printed in the United States until after the Revolutionary War. All the Bibles that were printed were Indian Bibles because we had permission to do that, but we did not have permission to do Bibles in our own language or in the English language at that time. So why do we keep this first in how this print? Thank you. But why does Georgia need a RFRA? And the RFRA stands for Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And what is it? And that's a part that we've got to look at because this all came out of a whole, what happened in 93 and 97. And I'm going to ask, we've got a 5-minute video that I want to show you that kind of gives us a quick historical summary if you can pull that together for me. There you go.
Americans can trace their roots to every corner of the earth. We represent every race, culture, and religious faith. And while it sometimes feels like we can't agree on anything, we're united by ideals that make this diversity possible, including the notion that every individual has the right to believe, speak, and live according to their own conscience. But sometimes even basic rights have to be balanced. For example, yelling "fire" in a crowded theater is not the same thing as free speech. So over the years, our rights have been tested in the court system, and time and again, they've been protected. But when it comes to Americans living out their faith, things have shifted out of balance. The problem began in 1990 when the Supreme Court ruled that long-held religious protections could no longer override a government policy. This shocking decision overturned decades of legal precedent and, in effect, downgraded the free exercise of religion to a second or even third-class right. Now in the courts, virtually any government policy can limit how people act out their faith, and it doesn't even require a compelling reason. Why should you care about this? Even if you aren't a religious person, the right to free exercise is really the right to live peacefully according to your conscience, especially when you're in the minority. Thankfully, both parties in Congress recognize this, and in 1993, they came together almost unanimously and passed a bill to put things back in balance. The law mandated two things. First, that the government must once again prove a truly compelling reason to limit a person's free exercise of religion. Second, that any limitations imposed by the government must be applied in the least burdensome way possible. This overwhelmingly bipartisan bill became known as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA. But a few years later, the Supreme Court ruled that as a federal law, RFRA only protects people from federal government policies, once again leaving people of faith vulnerable to city and state policies that force them to violate their beliefs or that prevent them from doing what their faith requires. Now, it's up to individual states to pass their own state RFRA laws to make sure people of faith are protected from all levels of government. But how does RFRA work in the real world? Here are a few examples. At a public kindergarten in Texas, a Native American boy was told he was required to cut his traditionally styled hair before he could attend school. The parent sued, appealing to the state's RFRA law, and they won. The court ruled that the government-run school did not have a compelling reason to overrule the family's religious freedom. But RFRA is not an excuse for anyone to just circumvent the law. A Muslim woman in Florida refused to remove her full-face veil for a driver's license photo, so the DMV declined to renew her license. She sued, citing Florida's RFRA law, but the court found that the government did have a compelling reason to require full-face photos. However, to enforce the law in the least burdensome way possible, the woman was allowed to have her photo taken in a private room by a female photographer. This common-sense balancing test is exactly how RFRA works. It simply provides a tool for the courts to weigh people's religious rights versus the government's duties. So what might happen in a state that doesn't have a RFRA law? In 2017, at a public university in Georgia, a student was told to stop preaching in a designated free speech zone because his words were said to be disturbing. The student has initiated a lawsuit to challenge that policy. But the state of Georgia has taken the position that the free exercise of religion is a third-class right, and therefore the school merely has to show it has a rational reason to win the case, even if the resulting burden on the student's religion is substantial. Unfortunately, misinformed people have claimed that RFRA is a discrimination law, but those same opponents cannot point to a single case of discrimination in RFRA's long legal history. Instead, RFRA is about restoring the basic human right of all Americans to peacefully live according to their own beliefs. Georgia must act to join over 30 other states that have already restored the basic right to free exercise of religion. Share this video with friends and family and sign a petition today urging Georgia government and business leaders to support RFRA.
If you'll put me back on. Thank you. Here's what you need to understand. In '93, this went through. It passed through the Congress unanimously and with 3 dissenting votes in the Congress, and President Bill Clinton signed it into law. If you go back, you can actually see the signing ceremony, and you actually have a really diverse group for what's going on. In '97, the Supreme Court ruled that the federal law did not apply to the states. And if you look at the 10th Amendment says what's not delegated to the feds comes back to us. And so then each state had to individually accept that. I want to just share something real quickly. In the First Amendment we've talked about, we have religion, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition our government. Does anybody know who this man is? Any of y'all know who Desmond Doss is? If you've not seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge, he is the man in Hacksaw Ridge who was the conscientious objector, who received the Medal of Honor. And interesting, he is a beautiful picture of what RFRA, a true religious liberty, looks like. He actually lived in Georgia, and in Georgia, we actually named a highway after him, because after World War II, he came here to live in Georgia, and after he passed away. And he was recognized in the 1980s that it was there. But here's the part that I want you to see, and if you see the movie's a little, for y'all that are squeamish, it's a little bloody because it was very bloody. It was one of the most bloody battles that went on. But here's what happened. He came in as the Seventh-day Adventist, and he came in as a volunteer. He came in and refused to carry a firearm, but was willing to go into battle. They say 75 to 100 men that he pulled out of the battle and down the hill when there were high casualties. And even for himself, he had been injured and was shot by a Japanese sniper. But here's the interesting part of what happened. The RFRA part is this, is the government had a compelling government reason to have young men to fight a war. And he came, and he actually volunteered. But what they did, he had a deeply held religious belief. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, and said, I will not pick up a firearm, but I'm willing to go into battle unarmed and help men who are being injured. And that's what he did. It's a phenomenal story if you look at what's going on. So what they did, the government allowed him to do that. And then he went in and did this and was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was the first person to ever receive the Congressional Medal of Honor as a conscientious objector. Also interesting, I found a little bit more about him history-wise. The church, the Seventh-day Adventist, actually created a school for their young men to go to medical school, to go into the war, and would not carry guns because of what he had done. So I mentioned that to you just a little bit. George Washington said this, don't let anyone claim tribute of American patriotism if they even attempt to remove religion from politics. That was in his farewell address. Interesting, even Jefferson, he said the reason that Christianity is the best friend of government is because Christianity is the only religion that changes the heart. John Adams said our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to govern any others. Ronald Reagan, when our founding fathers passed the First Amendment, they sought to protect churches from government interference. They never intended to construct a wall of hostility between government and the concept of religious belief itself. These are the states, if you look at them, the ones that are in green, it's a little here, that already have a RFRA law enacted by legislation. The yellows are the ones that already are done either through their constitution or otherwise. And you can kind of see what's happening where we are from that standpoint. Texas, Florida, Alabama, all of those have that in place right now. This is the top 10 states to do business as of 2017. And of that group, Georgia and Ohio were the only two that did not have any kind of RFRA law. So it's not minus more, it's not an issue that hinders business from that standpoint. Bill currently is, this bill's a little different from any of the bills, because what my bill is in SB 233, it is simply a mirror image of the federal law. Now the bills that were vetoed had a lot of other things added onto them, and all we were doing is looking to use the federal language to reference, and it would just say this: state law or local law would have to hold that strict scrutiny standard and show a compelling government reason for that law to be enforced and to violate someone's deeply held religious convictions. And that's really all it does. It's not a major, it's really balancing the court system is what it does. It's in committee right now. It was put there last year. Lieutenant Casey Cagle put it in the Rules Committee. I'm asking for that to come back out. And like I said, this is one, even our governor, Governor Nathan Deal in '93, he voted for the same bill that we're asking for now. And it's really doing this. Our federal government has said this is not an issue that we are handling at the federal level. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the states to do that. And so that's what this is really about and what the bill's about from that standpoint. And I thank you, and I turn this back over to Randy. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Harbin. Before the board discusses this, I'm going to open the floor for discussion. I assume there's going to be some folks that want to talk both in support and against this. Now, the process that we've got up here is we're going to ask you to come up to the mic. There's a piece of paper up there that you can sign your name. We're just trying to keep a record because sometimes the recording doesn't get the name down really well. We're not asking you to give the address, but generally if you live in the county, we'd like to know, are you Peachtree City, Fayetteville, in the county? Where do you live? So we will take comments at this point. If anybody wants to come up, the mic is open.
Just leave it, lady.
Just leave it.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Hearn, and I started drafting what I was going to say, and I've kind of tweaked it as I've listened here. I am the mother of 2 gay sons and a son-in-law. I do not begin to understand the nuances, all the verbiage, the legal stuff that goes in here that we've talked about tonight, that I've watched for the last 3 years with RFRA. It's very hard to parse it all about, to pull it apart. This is what I do know. My loved ones and I do have an agenda. I want them allowed to live with all the rights given to non-LGBT people. They don't want special treatment. They want equal treatment that is fair. As a public school teacher, I'm expected to teach and respect all of my students. I cannot say, I'm sorry, I don't teach Johnny because. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. You know, it's nothing like working on your birthday. But on this occasion, I am here. Unfortunately, my good friend, the State Senator Harbin, him and his video, what it did not say. So I'm just going to run through my prepared notes here. Religious freedom or religious liberty, whichever language you prefer to use, the legislation or ordinances are not conducive to good governing. We all took an oath to do no harm. Our laws reflect who we are. This is why Governor Deal continues to veto Senate Bill 233. For such a measure doesn't belong in the state of Georgia. I quote, this is Governor Deal, "Our state is doing exceptionally well, and we've seen rather disastrous consequences from other states." Now this is Governor Deal. "I see no reason or justification or rationale for this type of legislation in Georgia." Now, this is Derrick Jackson. Think about this, gentlemen, the economic consequences for such an ordinance. 10 years ago, and I'm just going to use one, because I'm not going to take 5 minutes. Just think about the film industry alone, which is an economic engine for Fayette County. Now, Fayette County has many economic engines, but I just want to use the film industry. 10 years ago, the film industry for the state of Georgia was $241 million. Today is $9.5 billion. That creates an opportunity for us to do infrastructure, great quality schools, an excellent quality of life in Fayette County. Senate Bill 233 and that type of measure disrupt quality of life. Now, you all attended the Fayette visioning just like I have when they did their final report. Fayette County is moving forward in the right way. Senate Bill 233 and any other ordinances will take us back in time. It does send a message of discrimination. That video says it doesn't, but when you read the legislation, and I am one that read legislation before I vote on it, it is discriminatory. And the reason why I am passionate and frustrated every time this topic comes up, because my wife and I combined, collectively between the two of us, served this country for 48 years in the Navy. So I understand the importance of the First Amendment. Freedom of exercise of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, the right to assemble. That's what my Navy family did between my wife and I. And so we take this very seriously. We open up every time we have a meeting in a government setting such as this, we always start off with prayer. So let me end with this, because we tend to bring laws and ordinances that is contrary to being Christ-like. So I evoke Luke chapter 10. I won't go through the entire verse. Take it upon yourself to read the parable of the Good Samaritan. I leave you with these 4 verses. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" Because you know Jesus liked to ask rhetorical questions. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as thyself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." We constantly look at laws every day. We just started the session. 233, Senate Bill 233 is bad for Georgia. It will be vetoed again. Any measure come close to Senate Bill 233 will be defeated because it's not good for Georgia. Thank you.
Am I on?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry to say that I live in Derek Jackson's territory in Tyrone. My name's Carol Gillespie. Did not vote for him. I will not vote for him, and I do not share his belief that he or his group of those who think likewise have any right to trample on my religious freedom. I do not trample on anyone else's.
Ms. Gillespie, try to just address us as the board.
Thank you.
Derek is not going to attack you personally.
Okay.
And that's just not an appropriate thing to do in
Thank you.
this. You got plenty of room to say whatever you want to say.
Okay. I do not see that what Mr. Harbin has proposed for us, as well as, of course, things that exist also in other states already, how this damages anyone, because no one is forcing anyone to run over someone else's religious freedom. No one is forcing me to do business with anyone else. No one is forcing them to do business with me. I simply do not see where any individual's religious liberty should be trampled on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Deborah Bazemore, and I represent State Representative House District 63, which encompasses a portion of Fayetteville. And I thank the Senator for his presentation. As you know, we're coming up on Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day, and I saw him in this piece. And as I sat and watched that, I don't think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who did love the Lord and was a minister, would be approving such a thing as Senate Bill 233. It is very divisive. We have enough division right now. We don't need any more. We don't need one group being pitted against another group. We, as my colleague said, we read the bills and we vote. We don't vote just for us. We vote for those that we represent. And we hear from those that we represent. And we have to do what's good for the whole, not just for a part. And that's where we vote. This bill has been around for a while, and it has been defeated time and time again. Even if it got to the governor's desk, the governor of this great state of Georgia said, no, we will not allow this to happen here in this state. So I stand this evening to say, please, be considerate of the whole. Be considerate of all of Georgia, as it was said, our economy, those that live next to you, those children that go to school with one another. This is very divisive. And if you look and see how many of us said no to this, you would also say no.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Hendershot. I reside in Peachtree City, and I will be very brief. In reading the proposed resolution, I just kept asking myself, why is this necessary? Throughout the resolution, it made reference to whereas the right to freedom of speech was codified in the First Amendment, whereas the free exercise clause of the First Amendment, blah, 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 whereas these things are already in place. I just don't understand why we need yet a separate resolution, unless a skeptical person might say that it allows people to discriminate, which, do we want to go there? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bonnie Williamson. I live on Sycamore Bend, and I had to come up here and say something as a person that have been discriminated against in not just this country, but in other countries also. This bill is just a way to use religion to discriminate against other people. If you want to have an enterprise that you can say who can come in and who can't, make it private, members only. Because as long as you're doing business with the public, everyone that's a part of the public should be able to come into your business to purchase or do whatever is offered at that facility. As for the senator, to me, this bill You could have stood here and turned your back on people, because everyone that signs it into law is turning their back on a great portion of Americans in the United States, a growing portion of Americans in the United States. And I say this because as a past school teacher, I see the numbers growing. I think this is a bill that should not pass.
I'm Carol Carver. I'd like to speak in opposition to the resolution. This is a country divided and a community divided, and I believe that this resolution is contributing to that division, and we need to work towards bringing people together and not separating them. If there's a business owner that works with the general public, that needs to be done in an atmosphere of mutual respect and not on the basis of religious opinion. I would hope that the credo of a religious liberties act would be love thy neighbor and not build walls to protect your own interest.
Good evening, Commissioners, public, Senator Harbin, distinguished state representatives. It is somewhat ironic that a few minutes back we stood together and we spoke of how great it is that we are celebrating Martin Luther King Day. And we talked about how people come together, people that disagree on all kinds of things, but we come together unified behind this great man and what he stood for. Senator Harbin, in his description and his story at the beginning, said that he was all about planting seeds. And I have to tell you, it's that planting seeds that scare me, because there's this thing called unintended consequences. As some states have already found out when they passed the RFRA law, it has significant consequences on the economy and the industry of those states. Here in Fayetteville, we have a jewel in Fayette County, the largest film production in the world, definitely in the United States, and it is growing. It is offsetting our taxes, it is improving our infrastructure, it is giving more proceeds to our school system, and it is attracting growth in industry. Jobs, people that want to work and live in our wonderful county. Pray tell, the young lady that got up before me said, why? Why would we, Fayette County of all places, seek to shoot ourselves in the foot? Politicians, I like some politicians. Now, y'all will be politicians, but sometimes y'all need to leave well enough alone and concentrate on what works and concentrate on that. Thank you.
My name is Jane Gallo. I live here in Fayetteville, and I want to thank Senator Harbin. For me, the video clarified a lot. I've heard a lot of misconceptions about the RFRA bill. For me, it was very interesting to know that it mirrors the federal bill, and the federal bill certainly hasn't caused discrimination. It's prevented discrimination. So I want to thank you very much for putting this video together and for coming here tonight. And after watching this and reading in bed, I do support it because I think everyone's rights should be equally defended, and I feel this bill will do that. Thank you, Senator Harbin.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Daryl Anderson, born and raised here, so I have to come up and speak on behalf of the citizens and, of course, the county. I love Fayette County. I'm born here, raised here. I think it's one of the most dynamic places in the world. It is an honor to be a hometown resident, but also I love the county. I mean, the city and the county are two wonderful places to live. This particular bill would put us in the hairs of all the media. I can just see it tonight on CNN. Fayette County votes in favor of Senator Harbin's bill, and you know it will be on CNN. It will be all over the national news. It will be in the AJC, and on, and it'll be on Facebook, all over. We cannot have this. This county is fabulous. We are growing. We have one of the most diverse, highly educated communities. I mean, we just have outstanding schools, outstanding people, low crime, although there's a few issues with the crime, but it's gotten better because we have a great sheriff and a great police force. But you cannot put this on CNN, MSNBC, ABC News, because it will be on that. You can rest assured, Senator Harbin, it will be on national news. We cannot put this county on national news because of this vote. I'm very disappointed that this is even coming before this body. We are one of the greatest places to live and to raise a family. And we welcome all persons of all ethnic backgrounds and diversity. And that's why we are great. We just have a great school system. We have great leaders. I have a wonderful mayor. And I love all of you county commissioners, except for maybe one or two, but I won't mention that. But anyway.
I don't take it personally.
I love you, Steve. I've always loved you since
Okay.
Peachtree City.
I'm just joking with you. I'm trying to lighten it up a little bit.
Okay. But I want you all to understand the repercussions behind this bill. And I applaud Governor Deal for vetoing it, and he will do it again. But don't put Fayette County on CNN and ABC News and MSNBC and AJC, because that's what will happen. It will happen. Here we are on Thursday night. It will be in the news on the weekend. It will be on the news on the weekend. You can rest assured, Senator Harbin. Is that what you want for the county? I don't think so. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you all very much for allowing me to speak. I love Fayette County. Woo-hoo! Okay. I'm sorry. I'm a little slow over here.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Randy Huff. I live at 289 Spear Road in Peachtree City. Been a resident of the county for about 47 years now. I rise in support of Senator Harbin and his proposed resolution before the Commissioners tonight. It seems to me that what would be followed here tonight, should the Commissioners accept this resolution and recognize it in virtue of your vote to be valid, is that it simply reflects, in its basic sense, what the Constitution already gives us, and that is the right to religious freedom. There should be no argument, it seems to me, that one could offer in opposition to it in a rational manner to say that, that if you wanted to argue against it, then you should form your coalitions and seek to have an amendment that overturns the First Amendment. But while it's in force, it's the law of the land. It's something that's governed this country for 250 years. It's only a new wave of a new way to read this and see this First Amendment and interpret it to mean, well, you know, things have changed. We're now a much more diverse country, which itself is a bogus position in my judgment, because we've always been a diverse country from almost the very beginning. And to say now that the diversity has increased to a point where to maintain the premises of the First Amendment are no longer valid simply by virtue of a wider diversity seems to me to be irrational. And there are, in terms of divisions between people, one thing that the whole idea of the First Amendment of the Constitution with respect to its religious liberty clauses was to have a foundation, to point to a foundation of religious belief as something that is there in order to transcend the differences between people, and as such, in that way, to bring us together, not divide us. So where the idea of dividing people comes from, I think, is just an unreflected position based on current waves of opinion that have no real basis in fact. So I could end there. I could go on longer, but I think I will end here. I support this, and I ask my fellow citizens here in Fayette County to pray over this and reflect on the claims of a loss of revenue to the county and to the state. Is that really going to happen? Do we really want to sell our souls and give up our liberties on the altar of economic growth? I don't think so, because those are bogus too. Nobody's going to leave here over that possibility. I think it's just a trumped up fear play, if you will, to divert attention from the underlying basic facts of why we should uphold the First Amendment of the United States, the Constitution of the United States. Thank you.
My name is Harry Bolton. I live in Peachtree City here in Georgia. I don't have a whole lot more to say, but we do have enshrined in our Constitution the right to religious liberty. Not quite sure why we need to add to that. And just as a reminder, Christ was called upon at the beginning of this meeting. I think he would be much more pleased if we would call on our citizens to love one another rather than enshrining into law the right to discriminate. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Leonard Pressburg. I live on Kite Lake Road in unincorporated Fayette County. I had a bunch of prepared things, and I kind of got thrown off by the video. You know, I was going to quote Governor Deal, and then the senator came in and showed a video when he was championing President Clinton, and it really threw me off. Starting with that video, and a video that accused people who have concerns about RFRA as being misinformed, I need to feel like I need to address some of the things in the video. The video talked about the generation of the federal RFRA law in '93 and the court standard of changing from compelling interest to a reasonable interest, and it was all about some Native Americans who wanted to smoke peyote. And, you know, the court said, no, you don't get a religious exemption to our laws, right? We have a whole history of that. Mormons don't get to practice polygamy, right? Even though it's a part of their religious belief. We have standards in our society, and you know, we don't get a religious trump card to get out of those. And so the history of these RFRA laws, and now we're the only state that doesn't have one, kind of misleads on the time frame of when all of these occurred, and most importantly, how they're interpreted now and what they mean now. So to talk about what these really mean and ignore the fact that in the business community they mean something very specific. And it's not that hard to get on Google and find out what the CEOs of Coca-Cola and Delta and every other big employer in Georgia thinks about this thing, right? It's easy to see what the Georgia Chamber of Commerce thinks about this thing. And so it's a little odd for me to be up here championing the pro-business, large business viewpoint on things, but that's where we are today. I'm a little bit confused about what the commission is voting on. I saw in the agenda something about adopting a House resolution, and then I came here and I got a public presentation on a Senate bill, so I'm not sure what the commission is here doing and supporting. I have some concerns about that House resolution. I think if you look at the history of that, some guy from West Virginia who is very proud of his anti-LGBTQ plus views on his website is the one who offered that as a resolution in the House, and it was never voted on. So are you voting on House Resolution 514? Are you asking for Senate Bill 233? I don't know what it is. And I don't know what the implications of what you're voting on are. I think about my wife, who's a physician in this county, taking care of women here for the last 30 years. You know, if she writes a prescription for one of her patients, can the pharmacist now here in Fayette County decide that they don't want to fill that prescription because it's against their religious views? Can the clerk not check her out? Where's the limit? What are we talking about? I'm not sure it's clear. By the way, you might want to check that George Washington quote. I'm not sure it's accurate. I didn't get a chance to check all the other ones. That might be lightening the mood. But this is a serious matter, right? Our economic fortunes are tied up in telling stories to the world and having people come here from all different backgrounds, all different places, and feel like Fayette County is a welcoming place for them to come and live and create these stories that are going to get seen all around the world. It's also interesting to me to hear so many small business owners worried about getting too much business. The speaker before me stood up and said, "This is all made up. We don't have these problems." I stand before you as someone who I feel like very publicly has my religious freedom infringed. I don't know if you remember 6 years ago when I was appointed to the Fayette County School Board and the things that people wrote in the newspaper and came to school board meetings to tell me about my place in this community because of what they thought my religious beliefs were. So for people to stand up and tell me that I'm misinformed or confused about what it means to be an American who can practice religion and believe what I want, I take offense to. This is not a bogus issue. This is a real issue. This is a real issue for our school kids, right? We know that there are vulnerable populations that people who support this measure don't want to protect those kids. And I can't, as a school board member, let this pass without objecting to it. The freedom to discriminate against other people because you have a religious reason for it is not something that we should tolerate in this county. It's not something that we should support, and if it's not something that you should give the impression that you support. So you can argue about what the 1993 federal law is. You can argue about the actual implications of the resolution you vote on. But you have to hear from all of the people who stood up today, from all of the businesses that have stood up continuously against these measures, that that is the message that you're sending. And don't send that message. Thank you.
My name is Peter Lewin. I live in Fayetteville. I guess it's unincorporated Fayette County. I have a Fayetteville address. Some of you know me. I'm a former government teacher at Fayette High for 15 years. And there's a couple things that I feel need to be brought to the Commission's attention and the state legislature's attention, believe it or not. The first of those is that the First Amendment was not the first thing considered by the Founding Fathers. It was the First Amendment. It was the first addition to a document that was already ratified. So the Constitution of the United States did not mention anything about religion. And there was a reason why it didn't do that. Okay? We were coming from out of an English system, and the English system, the church and state were combined. They were together. There was no separation of the two. And many of the settlers that came to this world came here because of that. They wanted to get away from that. They wanted to practice their religion. They didn't want free exercise of religion for everybody. They wanted free exercise of religion for them, not for the guy next door. All right, so, but when the First Amendment was written, it was written in two parts. Okay, there was the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, as I stated earlier in the radio voice that commended me for. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. The bottom line of that is government should not be in the religion business. It is no business of the government to be in religion. That's the bottom line. An example of that, I can give you a good example of that. Prayer in school. We all hear about prayer in school and how bad it is. There's nothing in the world that prevents a student from praying in school. What is prevented is somebody coming on the intercom and saying, we're going to pray now. Because that's a violation of the Establishment Clause. That's government getting involved in the religion business. So that's one thing. There's a big step. I have a note written here of the difference between family values and government prescribed family values. We all believe in family values. I was raised in a very, very strong family values, and one of the values that my father taught me above all else was tolerance. So that's one of my family values. That's not a government prescribed family value. Let me go on to the Free Exercise Clause real quick, because that's what a lot of this refers to. The second part of it, government shall make no law respecting the establishment or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That means that, and that's an individual right. That's a right of every person to exercise a religion. Now, ultimately, it's up to the courts to decide when a person's free exercise of religion violates good moral standards or community standards. I believe in Reynolds v. U.S. it said inimical something about community standards. In other words, it's up to the courts to do that, and the courts will do that. They did it with the lady, the Muslim lady in Florida, who wouldn't have her picture taken without her burqa, and then finally they arranged it so she could. Her religion was not violated. She went on and did what she needed to do, and it was up to the courts to do that, and it's been that way. This bill should not, under any circumstances, be debated or voted on. It's government getting involved in religion, and it has no business doing such. That's what the Establishment Clause is all about, and that's the bottom line. I appreciate your time.
Good evening, gentlemen. Charles Bennett, Fayette County resident for about 31 years. Live here in the unincorporated Fayette County. My 8th great-grandfather had a grandnephew, the second signer of the Declaration of Independence. And I'm not going to go through why, when his great-grandfather arrived from England in 1632 into Newbury, Massachusetts, it's so important to talk about it when we talk about religion and government, their involvement together and their separation apart. But I'm here to talk about RFRA because we have to, because of what happened in 1993 when the federal government stepped in and said that we will have this resolution. It's not really required even in the state of Georgia because the Georgia Constitution specifies religious freedom. When we stand and take the oath, as I did with this brother, for the United States government, I served 21 years with nuclear weapons, the ICBMs and the warheads. Here and overseas, we swore with our hand on the Bible to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Why did we do it on the Bible? We might have done it on a King James Bible. We might have done it on a New International Version. We didn't do it on the Quran, and there was a woman that was a judge in New York before she was, I don't know, murdered or died accidentally, that swore in on the Quran. The Quran denies the Bible, so that's another problem. But my ancestors came here from England because of a difference between the monarchy that was running the government and a particular religion. And English history shows Catholic, Episcopal, back and forth. When they came to this country for religious freedom. And even as they were in this country, before it was a separate country, it was a colony, we had people fighting between different factions of Christianity. But they weren't fighting over whether Jesus was the Son of God. They were fighting over whether we have an elected pastor or an appointed pastor. And my ancestor, who was the great grand uncle of the second signer of the Declaration, was actually fined in a court in Boston for being a Congregationalist, and they'd fought for 25 years with the Presbyterians that shared the same building. They would pray together, they would have meals together, but when it came to electing or appointing a pastor, they had differences. So my ancestors were fined by the court. We see this happening in Oregon with people baking cakes or not baking cakes, getting fined in a court over something that is their religious belief. And it makes all the news, yeah. CNN and everything else, they love to get into these things because it sells papers. It gets advertisers on. We go for RFRA because we've gone so far in the generations since these documents were written. The Declaration, which is really the basis for our country and what we do in our country. The same man also signed the Articles of Confederation, which did not turn out to be a good organization for the country, and they went back and started the Constitution. When they put the amendment in, the First Amendment, John Adams was the president of the Senate at that time. He was the vice president. That was the first Congress. The convention of the numbered of states have at the time of the adoption of the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its power, the further declarations or restrictive clauses should be added. And as an extension of the grounds of public confidence in the government, we best ensure the benefits of this institution. Don't make amendments. But the first 10 amendments were submitted with that in the preamble to the Bill of Rights. Don't abuse the people. And we can go back to the declaration that was signed by Josiah Bartlett of Kingston, New Hampshire, and see why. He put his name on the line of his own death warrant and said, I'm signing this from a little town in New Hampshire where they never fought the war so that I can be free and my family can be free to believe the way we want, and nobody in the government's going to come in and say, you pay these people $135,000 because you wouldn't bake them a cake. You tell your kids, hold your urine and go outside into the woods because there may be a man in the girls' bathroom. This is government interference. And I'm talking at the federal level because it flowed right back onto the state. And now we're looking at the state which has been struggling with this. I had people that worked for me. The senator talked about a person that was a Seventh-day Adventist. Ben Carson's a Seventh-day Adventist. And I had Jehovah Witness that was working for me when I was in Europe under Jimmy Carter in a NATO nuclear facility. And the man, when he showed up, I said, will you carry a gun? Will you use the gun in defense of the top secret nuclear materials that we have? I said, I'm not saying make that decision right now, but I know that from your religion, you have something that says, don't do this, like the Quakers in World War II. Accommodation from a government official based on the freedom of religion is what we need. We don't need more judges getting in the way. We've got too many courts and too many things that are done in the name of good government. Laws that are being written that aren't even being read when they're signed. We just need to have people that will say, and follow the Constitution, follow the state constitution, and believe me, it needs some work, and do those things. And if we have to have a RFRA in the meantime until we get back to doing things right in the Constitution of the United States and the state of Georgia, then we need to have the RFRA. But to have people come and continually say, we don't want this in the news, or we want this in the news, this is just wasting time and money. And I've wasted enough of your time tonight, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jane Owens.
Jane, can you pull the microphone down?
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. My name is Jane Owens. I've lived in this county since 1990. I've raised 5 children here. And I'm going to give you one compelling reason why I support what Marty Harbin is trying to do. It dawned on me a few years ago when we first started having this argument about RFRA that it might affect me. And here's why. I am a musician who plays a lot of weddings. And if someone came to me and asked me to play for a same-sex wedding, by my religious conscience, I would have to say, I cannot do that. I do not consider myself discriminatory in the sense that you're thinking of it, possibly, or some other people in the room might be thinking of it. We are all discriminatory every minute of our lives. Every decision we make in life is a form of discrimination, because by its very definition, discriminate means to choose between this or that. I'm unapologetically a Christian who believes in the standard of the Word of God, and I've come to that conviction in a greater way as I've grown older. But my greatest objective is the Great Commission, and the words of Jesus, where he said the greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. But it also depends on how you define your terms. What is loving? Because my God is a perfectly holy God who balances justice and mercy, right and wrong. His standards are higher than mine, and his laws are higher than mine. So I've made a conscious choice, as best I read it and understand it, that I will follow the Bible as my compelling reason. I have one reason. After I watched the video, it came really clear to me last week. I want to see that bar graph reduced to even again, or brought up. The religious side was down here. The others were still up here. Because as I've observed in the recent years, where the baker was hit with a horrible fine, the photographer was put out of business, and the florist was fined and put out of business. So I asked myself, as I was sitting here tonight, what would be the compelling reason for this kind of law if I were not a Christian? If I were a Muslim and I opened a business here in Fayette County, I would then be a small business owner who might choose, because of my religious beliefs, not to cook you pork. Would you deny me that right? I would hope not, because I would support the Muslim. He has the right to observe his religion according to his own beliefs, even though he's a public business. I have a right not to go to his business. My rights end where your rights begin, and vice versa. Everyone's rights have to be protected. And in every one of these cases that have come up in the courts in recent years, they've all been against Christians. Why is that? Why has no Muslim been brought to court yet? There must be another agenda going here. I would hate to think that in the United States of America, because I would defend to the death the right for my brother, Leonard Pressburg, to practice his faith, which I happen to know what it is. And I would never deny him the right to speak up, speak out, and practice his faith however he chooses to. And I would love to have a good dialogue with him. That's what we should do. At the same time, I should not be denied the right, under my religious convictions, to say no, that I would not play for a same-sex marriage. I should not be called discriminatory for that. That is my compelling reason to support RFRA. And because states are the final arbiters under the Constitution, not the federal government in this case. We have the right to take care of anything that's not totally mentioned for the federal government, which is kind of limited mainly to military, maybe infrastructure. Other than that, we at the state and local level, we make our own decisions. And as for the fear issue, I have had it up to here with we're afraid of big business. I'm not. And I can just say, if you really believe, and most of us may in this room actually claim this faith, if you really do believe that you call yourself a Christian and you believe in the God that wrote the Bible, I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying if you do, then you would have to acknowledge that that God says righteousness exalts a nation. That is the final arbiter. What is truly righteous? I don't care what faith you practice. Everyone has a standard for that. And everyone should have the right to practice it. That's my compelling reason.
Judy, why don't you come up and fill out your form? Judy? Okay, good. I'm just making sure, because we're running along.
Just in case, I thought I would.
All right.
Jane, I think that'll preach. Thank you for sharing that. Randy, thank you for supporting Marty Harbin's bill. Senator, thank you for taking a stand. It does my old tired bones really good to see men that have the courage and boldness to stand for what they know to be right. You were elected by this community. This community has re-elected you. And the reason for that is you represent our traditional Judeo-Christian values. That's what goes on in Fayette County. The resolution that you will be voting on in a few moments is sending a message to, I don't care if it's a national media or not, who are they, that we in Fayette County are supporting our First Amendment right to exercise our free religion. It's not bigotry. It's in response to the assault on the First Amendment and the assault on the church and the assault on our children and our values and our God. That's what is going on, and that's why all of this is necessary. And I am so thankful that we have elected officials that we pray for every day that have the boldness and courage to do that. By the way, this isn't about some people that have confusion in their life. This is about multimillionaires who have connections to NAMBLA and other child abuse organizations pushing their agenda to get God out of the picture so we have no foundation for our children to stand on, the Bible. Talking about that apple tree, what you do here is planting an apple tree. What you're standing for is putting the next generation in a position where they have some certainty. It's not out of hate or meanness. It's out of love. By the way, I have to correct something. And pardon me for this, but when my children were very small and I was a young mother, the first verses I taught them were Mark chapter 12, verse 29 through 31, King James Version. They said to Jesus, Master, what is the greatest of all the commandments? And Jesus said to them, Hear you, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And then he said, and the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. No other commandments are greater than these. That is in the context and the exact verbiage of what those verses said. If you love someone as you love yourself, you don't want to see them enslaved and enchained. When you know that they can be free simply by the truth, it may be uncomfortable to express it when people are screaming at you and calling you ugly names, but if you truly love them, you have to do that. And I'm hoping you love, and I know you do, our citizens here, our children, and their future enough to support this man who stands there many times alone. You guys have the support of the community right here at you. Downtown, it's a different situation. And I thank you for that, Senator. I really do. The message to our children, the purpose of law is to set the standards and say, this is what this community, this is our values. Well, RFRA reflects those values. And the message we send to our children by saying, no, we can't have that because it's discriminatory, the message is that God is not a God of love, that God is a God of meanness and ugly, and he discriminates and he loves some people more than others. Well, that's not true because there's not a person in this room that's not a sinner. The Bible said so. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. The wages of sin is death. The gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ. So we know those things to be true. We who are Christians in here have that in common, and that's more powerful and valuable than anything else that we have. Now, so far as the movie industry and major corporations, we don't need to be fearing them, gentlemen. We need to be fearing a holy God that's going to rain down on this nation his wrath as he did recorded in the Word of God. We need to be concerned about that because everything that they have can be with a match destroyed, with a heart attack destroyed. We're going to answer to a greater God, but we're going to answer for what we do to our children, and we need to make that stand, and we need to be about doing it in every way we can. You've got that opportunity tonight. I thank you, Commissioner Ode, for doing that. Let me see, was there one more thing I wanted to say? Oh, the business leaders, we've got a guy in Colorado who's a multi-billionaire who brought his money here and pressured our governor to veto that bill. And he pressures these big corporations because they gather in this money by child porn. Now, I'm not accusing him of child porn, but I'm telling you the connection here. When you get home, Google NAMBLA. And then Google Gil's name and look at this. This is not about somebody being confused and the government coming in and forcing something on them. This is about the very foundation and the very future of our children. And gentlemen, I thank you for your service. I thank you for your service too. I have 4 grandsons serving right now. And I want them to know, yes, thank you. Me too, and all the rest of them. And we better be praying for them every day. But while they're standing there, we need to be standing wherever God puts our feet. And today, gentlemen, he's put your feet right here. You make sure that tree's planted for the future with what you do. And thank you again, Senator. We love you. We appreciate you.
Judy, if you could, please. Can you please put your name on the record?
I did.
Out loud.
Audibly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Judy Wilson. I live in Fayetteville.
Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Morath. My husband, Bill, and I live in Tyrone, and we have lived in Tyrone since 1994, so we've been here almost 24 years. And I just wanted to thank Senator Harbin for being here tonight and showing the video. And I would just like to say that I support him and I support RFRA. And I don't think that we could do anything better for our county but to support it also. And I think that liberty is the most cherished possession we own as Americans, and it should be protected at all costs, everybody's liberty. And when people have the liberty to not participate in what violates their conscience, that is one of the most important liberties we have. So I would say that good law is profitable for local government, state government, federal government, and good law cannot be reduced to dollars or to money. Good law is good, irregardless of what we think it's going to do to the economy. And I would just also like to back up something that was said earlier, that the definition of love is not accepting everything as all behavior as being equal, because it's not. And for me to participate in a same-sex wedding by providing a cake or music or flowers would be unloving in my mind. It would be unloving because I would be condoning, I would be celebrating with that couple in something that I feel is unprofitable, an unprofitable lifestyle. And to me, that's not love. So I just want to give my support to RFRA, and I hope that that's what will happen here in this county. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's 18 folks. We've got plenty of time for a mower. If anybody else wants to speak, please come on up.
Is the opportunity only to speak once?
Yes, sir. We'll be here all night, Leonard, if we go back and forth. I mean, we just will.
I was just, had some further thoughts.
Hey,
Well,
hey,
that's the
you
problem
got-
with going first.
You got a good 5 minutes, which is more than the Board of Education allows, right? They allow 3. So consider that, Leonard, and stand up for free speech in Board of Education meetings.
We got a big time. Right? Yeah, we would like to go home.
Had to do it.
Hi, I'm Ann Knowles, and I live in Fayette County. I've lived here since '95. I'm married to a man who is a native Fayette Countian. Ann Knowles is my name. I'm not an orator, but I just want to support the RFRA. God founded this country. And I get too emotional when I speak, but I just want to give my support, and thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't know how long this next part of it's going to be when I bring the discussion back up to the board. Let me just simply get kind of an idea. Do you think that our discussion is going to be lengthy? Because if it is, I want to take a break before we do that. Or do you think it's going to be shorter? Well, no, I just don't know. Well, I know it can get lengthy.
If we need to take a restroom break, we probably ought to take one now, I would assume.
Okay, well, let's do that. I'm showing 25 after. If we could be back in our seats at 1/2 hour. That gives you about 6 minutes.
Gives everybody a chance to stretch anyway. Well, first meeting.
All right, I'm going to bring the meeting back to order. We went a little bit past the half hour, but that's fine. Before I close the public comment portion, is there anybody else that hadn't already spoken that wants the chance to come up here and speak? Frank?
My name is Frank Gardner, and each night I come up at these meetings, so I swear I ain't gonna say anything. This amendment of this subject, I'm not gonna speak for it or against it. I will say, I think it's out of place to ask our commissioners to make a religious statement. And we pay you to do administrative work for our county. I don't think we voted for you. Well, I ain't going there. But anyway, I think this is a religious thing, and if you need to take it, you need to get it in the ballot box and let the people vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to bring the discussion back up to the board. Randy, this is your item, and either you can make a motion or you can start making comments.
Well, I wanted to clarify one thing. It was kind of said that this bill had been vetoed. This bill has never been vetoed. The bill that was vetoed was a total different bill, and it did have other things in it. The fact is that our governor, when he was at the federal level, he voted for exactly what this bill says. So I think I just wanted to make that clarification, and I wanted to make a motion in support of the resolution 2018-03 to adopt text of House Resolution H.R. 514 of the 114th Congress of the United States to take any necessary action to protect religious freedom in Georgia, and to request that the Georgia Assembly also adopt said text in support of Senate Bill 233, Senator Marty Harbin's bill.
I've got a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Discussion.
I'll start if you'd like. I appreciate everybody's comments, and one thing I really brag about this commission, one thing we do is we do allow you to have your say, and we allow you to say it as long as you say it. We just ask that you don't repeat yourself continuously, but we do allow you to have your say. And one of the rights that we do cherish, but sometimes curbed by local governments, and they hold you to 2 minutes to 3 minutes, and they start the clock, but when you stand up to walk to the podium. So we do allow you to have your full say, and I take great pride in that. So we have great debates here, and we got to hear what everyone had to say and offer. You know, I hear a lot about, you know, what would Amazon think? What the Georgia Chamber of Commerce said, what some people in the legislature say, and let me tell you, I mean, I've been disappointed over and over again by the state legislature. I've gone to committee meetings and I've watched people who said, I absolutely stand on something, and when the special interest puts the screws on them, and this is not just RFRA, this is rules, Senate rules, House rules, way to conduct business, and they flip the other way. I went to the Senate Rules Committee, and they were trying to have a vote on publicly displaying the votes when you added amendments, because what happens is they tag something onto a bill, and then they all run under the balcony so no one can see them vote, and they all vote, and there's nothing recorded, and no one knows how it goes, and they do voice vote or hand vote or whatever. I've seen that on several occasions, and I watched some of the people who were the advocates for transparency and open government, and I watched them all vote against a simple amendment like that. So my disdain is bipartisan. It's the Republicans as much as it is the Democrats, and I hate to see it. But the Georgia Chamber's done some of the same things when they supported illegal aliens in the workplace. We have so many kids that either graduate from high school and that's it, or don't make it through high school. And all the construction jobs, all the other jobs in landscaping and business service areas are now, a lot of them are staffed by illegal aliens. And there are no opportunities for a lot of these kids. And there are no manufacturing jobs. Those are dwindling. And that's my Georgia Chamber of Commerce, supporting illegal immigration. And so, when I'm asking, do I take these organizations in great stead and listen to heed what they have to say? Half of it. And the other half I let go because I disagree with them. But we heard a lot about division. We're a divided country. We're a divided country. Well, let's go back to the time when we were united in 1993. And federal RFRA was being proposed. Senator Ted Kennedy, the Lion of the Senate, adamantly supported the federal RFRA bill. Believe it or not, Representative Chuck Schumer introduced the bill. Bipartisan support overwhelmingly, and President Bill Clinton signed it. That's when we were together. That's when we were unified, and we had a Congress that was willing to work with a presidential administration and get things done. Bipartisan support. Now, the interesting thing about why they had to do that in the first place, and the video talked about some of the rulings, court rulings and whatnot, was the government was in the process of oppressing a Native American tribal custom going back centuries and suppressing their religious beliefs. Congress couldn't take it, said it was unfair, and RFRA was created in 1993, passed bipartisan, introduced by Chuck Schumer, lionized by Ted Kennedy, and signed by Bill Clinton. And that saved the day. Religious freedom is directly linked to the identity of the American system. How many countries have we seen? Myanmar, China, the Arab nations, where you can be killed on the spot because you are of a different religious faith, or imprisoned, beaten, tortured. Where have we seen that? All over the world. Religious freedom is directly related and linked to the American system. Now, here's the interesting part. I hear a lot of people talking about bakeries and florists and maybe wedding dress designers or whatever it is. Weddings just seem to be the ultimate question here, right? I mean, it seems everything revolves a lot around weddings. But the interesting thing is the RFRA bill asserts, and this is the one that Nathan Deal voted for, Representative Nathan Deal, when we all came together in 1993 and we all united and worked together. And this is the language in the bill that we have that Senator Harpin's proposing. And RFRA asserts that government has to show a compelling interest for why its policies should override an individual's religious freedom. All right, now think about this. All the bill is telling you is your government cannot suppress your religious freedom. The bill directly addresses oppression by the government. These civil suits, where you've got a couple and they don't get their wedding cake or something else, they don't get their flowers or whatever, that's a civil suit between two private parties. The legislation doesn't cover that. It's not even in the bill. So people who've told me they've read the bill and it's discriminatory, I got to say, go back and read the bill, because I read you the assertion straight from what the language says. It says the government has to show a compelling interest for why its policy should override an individual's religious freedom. Now, can government be oppressive? Absolutely. Ask that Native American Indian tribe. Can government be oppressive? Absolutely. Ask the people in New England where the local government took their property from them, gave them a pittance for it, and then gave it to a private entity to redevelop, and the Supreme Court of the United States said that was okay. I thought we had property rights in the United States, Senator Harbin. I thought we did. But the government seized these people's property, gave it to a private development interest, and allowed them to build a private entity for profit because they didn't like the look of the building and they thought they could do a better downtown if somebody else used the property. So can government be oppressive? Abso-doggone-lutely, government can be oppressive. Do we need protection? That's why we have the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, to protect us from the oppression of government. Now, let's look at some things. 20 states have RFRA. And the United States, the federal government, has RFRA. Do you know there has not been one discriminatory ruling using the RFRA bill in those 20 states in the federal courts? Or the federal government? Not one. Do you know that the Florida woman who was the Muslim, who was listed in the video, do you know what defense her attorneys used? They used the Florida RFRA law in her defense. And they changed how the state conducts themselves. Do you want your local halal butcher to have to serve pork? Well, if I want pork for my wedding, that seems to be what the thing is. We probably ought to do it. Can they force you to do that? Can government force you to do various things? I don't know. The government in Portland can force you to do flowers, or they'll sue you into submission and bankrupt your company, and you'll have to forfeit your house. That happened in Oregon with the florist. Orthodox Jewish girls. Should we force them to wear the same PE clothes as the other girls? Can't cover your arms? Can't cover your legs? Have to wear shorts, t-shirts? Should we force them to do that? Why not? That's what the majority does, right? That's what we stand for, the majority rule, right? No. That's why we have the Bill of Rights. And that's why we protect those people. But unfortunately, I'll tell you this, that's why a lot of the Orthodox Jewish people have to have their own schools, because local school systems generally don't comply with their religious beliefs and whatnot. But are you going to force them to do like the other students? Dietary restrictions in the cafeteria, we're going to throw those out? Why not? That's what the majority want. That's what the majority eat. Who cares, right? So let's take some examples locally, recent locally. The Gwinnett College example that was in the video. I've researched that heavily. I followed it. I'm a big First Amendment person, free speech person, freedom of expression person. I followed that all the way through. Do you know that student is African, who is studying at the university, who thought he was in the greatest, freest country in the world? And what he was doing, he had the audacity to practice his faith. He had these little things called tracts that had religious verses on them, and he was offering them to anybody who wanted to have one. You didn't have to take one. He didn't grab you by the arm. He didn't stick it down your shirt. He didn't force it in your pocketbook. He just asked if you wanted one. Do you know they carried him out of there? So he went to the administration of the university, and you know what the university administration said? I'm sorry, son. You have got to do it in the free speech box on the campus. You know what a free speech box is? It's about a 5-by-5 little square somewhere in the outside of campus, on the outer edge and fringe of the perimeter, where you can say whatever you want to say. That's what colleges have come down to. You have a free speech zone. So at this Gwinnett College, 90, let's just say 5% of the acreage on the college campus, you can't express your religious beliefs. That's what the school administration said. So you know what he did? He went to the free speech box, being a nice student, being very polite, wanting to obey the laws, doing what he was told by the school administration, and he went to the free speech box, and you know what they did? The police came and carried him out of there and took him off campus and told him never to do it again. Now, this is after the administration told him it was permissible in the free speech box. They hauled him out of here. He asked, "What have I done wrong? I followed your instructions." Someone was offended by your beliefs, and they reported you. Go look up the transcripts. Someone was offended by your beliefs. If you didn't think that was a good one, Savannah State University. All these schools are government funded, right? That's why RFRA would come into play. Savannah State University. They have all kinds of clubs on campuses, and they wanted to start a Christian-affiliated club. Well, they had other religious clubs. Why not? Well, guess what? They rescinded the Christian club at Savannah State University. You know why? They cited hazing violations. Do you know what the hazing violation was? They had a foot washing ceremony. Now, do you know that foot washing goes back centuries to the point of Christ and centuries before that in the Jewish tradition? That was a hazing violation at Savannah State University, ladies and gentlemen. Man, that's offensive. All these people quoting Jesus and the disciples, they all did foot washing. Go read the book. They all did it. But now, because it might offend somebody, we're not going to allow that on campus anymore. Do these people need to be protected? What if my religion requires me to wear some sort of head ornamentation? If somebody's offended, do I have to take it off? You might on Savannah State University. You might in Gwinnett College. Let's talk about who has the rights. Do you know that in the federal penitentiaries all across the United States, they are covered under RFRA? Do you know that federal prisoners have more religious freedom than people living in the states that don't have a RFRA bill? People who are incarcerated have more rights to address religious grievances in their system than people who go to Savannah State University or Gwinnett College. It's amazing. But that's the truth. But anybody who says this is about a gay, LGBTQ couple, individual, anybody who can't get a wedding cake or who can't get flowers for a ceremony, you haven't read the bill. Haven't read the bill, because the bill says the government will not oppress your rights as a citizen, your religious rights as a citizen. It has nothing to do with civil suits between two private parties. Nothing. And you will not find a case where RFRA has been used to defend someone in a suit between two private parties. Like the woman in Florida, it was done because Florida had the RFRA law. That's why they cited it. And that Muslim woman was able to preserve herself, her religious integrity, and have her photo taken behind a curtain and still adhere to the law. And that's what the law was for, to get the government to change their policies or their procedures in such a way as to allow her to maintain her religious integrity. And that's what it's about. So anybody who thinks it's weddings and flowers, and I hate my photographer because she won't shoot my graduation or whatever it is, you haven't read the bill. That's not the bill that Chuck Schumer and Ted Kennedy and Bill Clinton went for in '93 and Nathan Deal, and it's not the bill now. That's not in there. So I would ask you, Go back and read the bill. And if you think those young men at Savannah State University, or the group of people at Savannah State University and the young man at Gwinnett College were mistreated, then I would ask you to defend religious liberty in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else up here?
I guess, Mr. Chair and my colleagues, I'm prepared to have a number of comments and statements, but let me start off by really trying to understand from my colleague, one, what we're trying to accomplish, and does this move us towards elevating the quality of life in this community from the standpoint of our charge and our responsibilities? I'm confused. I guess Mr. Pressburg kind of said it. You know, what are we actually voting for? And I know you stated the contents of the House bill and support of the current SB bill. However, with that being said, we've had some unique opportunities, in my estimation, in my opinion, through either ACCG as an organizing body that does our lobbying. We missed that or didn't take advantage of it for whatever reasons. And so tonight we have created an atmosphere, if you will, that has a number of people confused. I'm among them. We swear on the Bible. We start with prayer. We have a symbol behind us that was my first issue when I joined this body. You know, I'm just trying to feel like if what we were trying to accomplish, I think this is a demonstration of where it leads to. And I'm sure, Senator, you will have the same issue with your colleagues in the chamber, and as well as in the lower chamber, it will be debated. I'm just trying to figure out why our position is here. Is this a litmus test to see how religious we are, where we stand? I think I read in the comments of the proclamation tonight, one of the, outside of biblical quotes for me, it's a quote Dr. King has: "The true measure of a man or woman is not measured by where they stand in times of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of controversy and challenge." And I think you stepped into the controversy. We all have, but we're being pulled in this, and I don't know if it really meets the requirements of why we're supposed to be here, some kind of religious litmus test. We talked about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. We went all around all those things that supposedly give us safeguards. And we can insert the word religion into those safeguards, since that's the topic tonight. Just help me understand what we're trying to do, and does it elevate us, and does it meet the standard for what our responsibilities are? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll reply to that. This is simply a resolution to help move the Senate Bill 233 forward. It is part of our yearly legislative package. We, as a board, started a couple of years ago sending a legislative package to our representatives that we would like to see move forward through that legislative session, and we've been quite successful in some of our agenda items, and we bring this not as a litmus test, or this is to educate people and get the word out, and if the board members support such a resolution, we'll vote for it and we'll send it as part of our package.
I thank my colleague for clarifying, and I think I did understand why we were doing it. It's turned into something else, but certainly the legislative package normally that I've been associated with always sends up something that we're responsible for within our jurisdiction. This does not meet that, in my opinion. And so therefore, it's complicated the matter, and it's brought out passions of people that we do well to hear. And we know, we see the diversity explained in our community by this very topic, and the individuals that stood up to speak. But I don't think I think Frank said it best, it's not in our purview right now, or period, in terms of our responsibilities as they're outlined. And so therefore, Mr. Chair, my colleagues, I think I know where my position is on the issue. Let me take this moment to say a couple of other things procedurally. One, Senator Harbin, my desire to not move this is because we did receive a number of emails, and I know yours as well as the other state representatives and elected officials here. Time is valuable. So we value you being here and don't want to delay your time. But it has done just what I assumed it would do, is we hadn't even got to the business of why we're here just yet. And we're into almost 2.5, 3 hours. And so the other part of the equation is I was not aware in putting this agenda package together, and I think we do a disservice to our citizens as well, that there would be a presentation of some sorts, a video and so forth and so on. I think had we put that out and published that, more people might have come out. And even if they didn't come out, the issue is, did we give people the opportunity to know that their state senator would be here? We probably had more people talking at the same time, Mr. Chair. But still, I think procedurally we need to be cautious and careful of that going forward. And that's a procedural issue that I'm raising to this body that we all take into consideration, to be as transparent, we use that term often, as we can be, that people will know this issue not only was on the table, but the state senator would be here and would be making a presentation. All that was not made available to people. And so, again, I apologize for switching it, but we haven't even handled our business. Not that this isn't our business, but, you know, we hadn't even gotten to our real core issues of our responsibilities that we did take an oath of and that are outlined in our charter agreement as a political subdivision of the state of Georgia. So, Mr. Chair, right now, those comments that I have, and I appreciate you all's attention to those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments up here?
I'll just offer some quick ones, Mr. Chairman. I just want everyone to understand, I understand the passion. I mean, I know people on both sides of this issue. I saw them come up here, and I'm friends with a number of them, which makes it doubly hard when you're sitting here and voting. And you know, some of your friends are going to be a little bit miffed with you, and some of your friends are going to be very ecstatic with you. And that's a position we're in because this is on the agenda this evening. So I've looked at this. I've heard everybody. I've heard it for a couple of years now. This is going to be, for me, this is a mirror image of the federal bill, of the federal law. I don't see it as a discriminatory bill. And that seems to be the crux of the whole matter here. I look at discrimination as more proactive than defensive, and I don't see that here. I don't see that it's going to be used in a discriminatory way. Never say never, could happen. But that's the way I'm looking at this, and I don't perceive it as discrimination. So I just want everyone to understand that I am going to vote, and when I vote, I understand the passion on both sides. And the big thing is that we keep talking and keep communicating, and don't take this in any other way than this is just another vote that we have to deal with. And as we work together, which we're doing civilly here this evening, you know, I'm an optimistic person. Things will work out. So I just want folks to know where I am and when I vote. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, to respond to Commissioner Rousseau, I think one of the things that I think brings this into our arena is that we did take an oath to defend the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Georgia, and to abide by the ordinances of Fayette County. And this definitely falls under the Constitution of the United States. It's a definite First Amendment issue. I'd also like to reiterate, if you look and read the bill and read the language, when it says that the government has to show a compelling interest for why its policy would override an individual's religious freedom, what does it not say? It doesn't say that it could find a compelling reason and restrict your religious freedom. That is actually a possibility in that bill. If the court uses RFRA and they find that the government has a compelling interest for limiting your religious practice, whatever that practice may be, they can do it in the RFRA bill if they have a compelling reason. And that's up to the federal courts. And let me tell you, the federal courts, I've been there. It's like tossing a coin. You have no idea how they're going to rule, so you probably got a 50-50 shot at winning. But that's it. If you think this bill totally eliminates anything, you haven't read the language. Because they could come up with a compelling reason and the court could rule in their favor. It happens all the time. Remember the property rights case I told you about? Where the local government seized the property, sold it to a private interest so they could redevelop it for their own personal profit? Judge Scalia, it broke my heart. The most conservative justice we've had in the Supreme Court voted to eliminate that couple's property rights, which we all thought in this country we had property rights. And Justice Scalia voted in favor of the government doing that. So you don't think government can be oppressive and you don't think it can come from anywhere? It could. But if that government comes up with a compelling reason and the federal court says that's a compelling reason, it's done. It doesn't matter what your religious practice is. So anybody's talking about total exclusion, total exemption, you're not reading the bill.
One of the first things they teach you as a county commissioner in county commissioner school is that your first vote, you're going to make half the population mad. And the second vote, you're going to make the other half mad. And for the next 3 and 3/4 years, you're not going to have any friends. And there's no way that this vote in a minute that I'm going to make half of the folks, I believe, happy. My understanding is what we're voting for is a resolution, a Fayette County Resolution 2018-03, which is attached to my agenda item. And I want to read simply a little bit about this. This is what we're saying, or what this board is saying in this resolution. Now therefore be it resolved that it is hereby the sense of the Board of Commissioners that 1, Fayette County shall not infringe upon the ability of individuals to act in accordance with their sincerely held religious beliefs. And 2, Fayette County condemns any behavior by any other government that limits the ability of individuals to express their religious beliefs. I don't know how anybody can reasonably argue with that premise. I would prefer, Eric personally, would prefer to not deal with these kind of issues because I agree with Charles that this is kind of out of our area. It's not dealing truly with the county business like we're dealing with the sheriff's office or the fire department or something like that. But quite frankly, last year, there was a legislative package that was sent up, and I can't remember what all, and y'all will remember this a lot better than me, because I know fluoride was one of them, and the operating of a boat was another. What were some of the other ones? The veterans tax, the veterans tax. And it was this county commission that sent a note up there, a resolution that said, you know, state legislature, y'all are kind of missing it. And I'm being kind to y'all. I know that y'all are in the room. I ran for county commissioner. I did not run for state senator or state representative. Y'all got a lot more busy things that are going on up there than we do down here. But that was something that this board struggled with. You know, we had some veterans that we felt like they should be able to get some exemption on their taxes, and the opinion from the attorney was you can't do what you want to do. And this board, although there was 2 of us that tried to push it through, this board did the right thing. They followed this state law. Our legislative package went up to our legislators, and that thing got changed. And those folks now get the benefit that they did not have the benefit. So sometimes there's things that are outside of kind of our comfort area that we normally deal with, that we kind of just simply remind the legislators. They generally listen to us. If you pick up the phone, they'll answer the phone. But we kind of remind them that there's some things sometimes that maybe they don't see that is important to us down here. And now this is only one of 159 counties. I suspect I know what's getting ready to happen in this vote in just a minute. I don't know for sure until we ask for everybody to raise their hand and vote firmly one way or the other. But based on my reading, and I read, we had 20 people speak tonight, and I didn't count fors and against. I wrote down for or against, but I haven't. I think there's probably more against than there are for. But that's not the way that at least I come up with this. I do try to listen to everybody that is spoken, and I try to give them as much respect, and I appreciate that the crowd has operated the way that they've operated. And I've heard the arguments. I've written some notes, but this one, to me, is a fairly easy one to decide. And it's based on that, now therefore be it resolved, the little bit that I read into the record. I agree with Steve. I mean, there's just not a lot. This is not, this is protecting folks. This is not saying you can go do this, that, and the other to somebody else. Protect the religious aspect of it. And so for that, you can read between the lines what I'm getting ready to do with my vote. But I just wanted to say a couple things. Maybe I'm a little too simplistic. I don't know. But this one looks like a fairly easy one to go through here. And I'm sorry that we've been here for 2.5, 3 hours talking about this. But I thought that it needed to be vetted. We're getting ready to take a vote. And Senator Harbin, I hope you can take this resolution and do with it what you can. But we're only one of 159 counties to try to help you out. Anything else that needs to be set up here or comments?
Yeah, I just need to respond back. Unfortunately, I don't see, my colleague said we are doing our job protecting the Constitution. I don't see where we're not protecting it. I can't figure out one particular time where we have it, and I don't see this as the test to say we are more so than we are any other time. So I get it. Yeah.
Anything else? All right, the motion's been made by Randy for the adoption of Resolution 2018-03 to adopt the text of House Resolution HR 514. That's my understanding of the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition to that?
Nay.
And that would be Commissioner Rousseau. Next item.